Okay. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be having almost like 105 slides. We're going to be talking about what is Google Discover. Most of you know, but we're going to talk a little bit more technical details, how it really works. Should you care or not? A lot of people is like, is this is something that will always be there? How to be eligible for Google Discover. There is a certain process, eligibility and classification, and we're gonna discuss is there a really way to optimize for Google Discover? Google has said there's not really a way. I'm gonna share with you 11 different ways that you can optimize for Google Discover. And then finally, I'm gonna discuss with you 11 reasons for why there is sometimes you face traffic loss in Google Discover. So we're gonna go through all of this and we discuss it in details. You guys still can see my screen, right? Yes, yes. Thumbs up for anyone I can see. Okay, good. Okay, awesome. Okay. So you can contact me at Shehata. I'm very active on Twitter. I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you want to tweet some of the stuff that you learned today, absolutely. Our hashtag is Google Discover. This is the QR for the code, and I think I put this page early on in the chat as well, so you can get more information about the webinar. Okay, so we have analyzed 654 trillion, yes, trillion impressions for this presentation, right? And it was a massive amount of work, which about 176 million pages from our tool GD Dash. So GD Dash is like a tool that helps publishers and sites to optimize for Google Discover and understand why they're getting Google Discover to begin with. So we took all the data from there and we analyze it, and we are sharing everything today. Every optimization tactic that we're talking about today is supported by data. So we're not just making things up. Okay, little bit about myself. My name is John Shehata. I'm the CEO and founder of NewsDash, and I was the global VP of Audience Development Strategy at Condé Nast for a while. I have been doing news SEO. I'm a true SEO at heart for 24 years now. So I got the pleasure and the honor to work with so many different local, national, international sites that I worked on and I optimized. I worked on TV programs. I worked on 4 elections. I worked on Oscars, Reddit, and Disney, and so on. So I truly enjoy news SEO. This is like a true passion of me. Okay. My company has 3 products. One is NewsDash, which is real-time news SEO. It's really focused on publishers, help them gain more visibility and traffic from Google. GD Dash is all about Google Discover analysis. And NES is our news and SEO, news and editorial SEO summit. So this is a conference that once a year, it's coming in 2 weeks, that mainly focus on SEO for news publishers. And that's all what we speak about. Okay, so what is Google Discover? Let's talk about Google Discover a little bit and how it works. So you guys know this is an AI-driven content recommendation tool. Google Discover is full of news, evergreen content, images, videos. It appears on mobile home pages right now. So if you have an Android and swipe, I think, right or left, you will get Google Discover. If you have an iPhone and you go to if you go to Chrome app or Google app and you're logged in, you will see all the Google Discover feeds. You can follow topics, places, all of this you guys know. So in a way, Google is trying to create their own version of like Facebook or Instagram or whatever, right? And they tried social many times before and they failed. This is their true time where actually they are succeeding. It's different from search because you're not searching for any keyword. Google actually try to understand your interests as a user and provide you recommendations to read. So if you think about the Google ecosystem, right? Google is 2 parts, is a search engine and a recommendation engine. A search engine, when you go to Google, search for something, you get the 10 blue links and the results and top stories and all that stuff. And a recommendation engine, you see it in 2 places. In Google News, which is news.google.com, you don't search, you go to sports page, Google say you need to read that. And in Google Discover, which is highly personalized, and I can argue no 2 users will see the same feed. So these are the 5 factors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that I believe Google looks at to determine your interests as a user, right? The first thing is your activity, right? What are you searching for? Your search history, right? And if they have, they definitely have access to all Chrome data, all your search history. But if they have access to other apps on your phone, they will also see what are you searching for. Evolving user interests, right? Hey, I'm buying a new house and suddenly I start searching for mortgage rates and stuff like that. Google will start showing me evergreen content because of the evolving search history. They look at your Chrome, your YouTube viewing history. What are you consuming in Google Discover? What type of videos you're watching, and your app activity. So this is the biggest important part where they determine your interests. They also see what you consume in Google Discover, what type of stories you like to click, what type of sites you're following, and so on. Location is a huge important factor. Are you at home? Are you at work? Are you on vacation? And so on. So location and language is very important. Is your device fast, slow? And finally, the explicit signals that you give to Google Discover. For example, like, hey, I like to follow this site. I like to follow this story. I like to follow these topics. So all of these determines your interests in Google Discover. So how does it work? So there are three things that you need to remember in this presentation, and we're gonna keep repeating them over and over and over. Entities, topics, and your interests, right? We spoke about interests and how Google like determine your interests. The other two things are entities and topics, right? So entities are coming from Google Knowledge Graph, which is like real life things, right? People, organizations, locations, and so on. And topics, this is the official name for it, topics, or sometimes Google call it content classifiers. But for the sake of simplicity, we're going to call it categories, right? This is the second element. So let's talk about this. So Google said we have something called knowledge graph, right? This is all the entities that we spoke about, people, places, things, and so on. Then they created something called the topic layer, right? So if you think about entertainment or celebrity news, that could be a topic layer that include a lot of entities, and Google understand the connection between them. So these are the connecting tissues between the different entities. And they have, for each topic, they have hundreds of subtopics and so on. So if you think in a real entities is like people, right? Actors, actresses, musicians, football players, and so on, organizations, right? Award shows and so on, events, Oscars 24, work of art, movies, songs, and so on. So these are all entities. Remember, entities are real life things. Topics or categories are like, celebrity gossip, entertainment news, business news, sports news, NFL, and so on. All of these are topics. And then the interests, as we discussed before, it depends on what you're reading, what type of celebrities, what type of content, all of this to bring it together. So let's take that story. You guys remember the past Oscars, right? And Will Smith slaps Chris Rock at the Oscars, right? Very popular story. It was shocking, and a lot of sites made a lot of traffic because of that. If you think about this story, the entities, right, that's coming from Knowledge Graph about that story is probably Will Smith is a person, Chris Rock is a person, Oscars or 2024 Oscars is an event, and the Academy Awards are organizations. So this is all the entities about that story. And Google really cares about the entities and the story. And this is not only important for Google Discover, this is also important for Google Search. So keep that in mind. Now, the categories, on the other hand, when you take an article and analyze it using Google NLP, it will tell you this article belongs to these categories or topics, right? Arts and entertainment / entertainment industry / film and TV industry, and with a relevancy of 95%. Arts, entertainment, celebrities, and entertainment news, relevancy 93%. Gossip and tabloid news, a relevancy of 47%. Movies, other, relevancy of 18%. So actually, Google can tell you what are the topics and what are the topics and the entities of any article if you use their services. So if you think of entities, these are all different entities that are available and supported. But in reality, when we analyze the 150, 160,000 million articles, these three are the most frequent entities. What does this mean for you? When you write an article, you need to ask yourself, right, what are the people, the locations, and the organizations involved with this article? And when we do like news SEO training, we always say your first paragraph is the most important, right? In addition to your title, right? So you need to think about what are the main entities that I need to include in my headline, and what are the main entities I need to include in the first paragraph and throughout the story. So remember, these are the most important. 30% are organizations, 29%, almost very close, is like people or person, and 24% are locations. So always keep these three in mind when you're writing any story and optimizing any headline. Should you really care about Google Discover? So a lot of questions, hey, is gonna last, right? So Google Discover started about at the beginning of 2018. I was one of the, when I was working Condé Nast, I was one of the very first people to join Google Discover. Back then, it used to be through RSS feeds, believe it or not. So it was a direct feed. I believe it matters, and it matters a lot. So the only number that we have about the number of active users in Google Discover came from September 2018. They said there's 800 million active users in Google Discover. Since then, they never shared any numbers about Google Discover, right? But we can estimate, if we look at Google growth from 2018 to 2014, they grew and the number of active users from 1.9 billion users to almost like I don't know 4.9 sorry, from 3 billion users to 4.9 billion users. So if we take the same growth percentage and apply it in Discover, I can assume or estimate there is almost 2 billion users on active on Google Discover right now. So this is an estimate, right, based on the growth of Google Discover. The other thing also that is really good about Google Discover, it sends you a lot of repeat users. So Google Discover, a part of the algorithm, is giving the user more of what they like. So if they click on your site and they come to you and they read your articles, it's like a circle, right? Google will feed them more of your articles and more of your stories, right? So this is something that doesn't even happen with Google search. If you think about Google search, most of sites and publishers complain that is one and done. Like you get this user and you never see them again, right? But with Google Discover, actually, Google, it's a part of the algorithm that they reward you for good content, that they keep sending you same users over and over. We did a study a month ago or so, and in GD we have about 400 news publishers that are using the tool. So we compared between how much traffic they're getting from search and Google Discover year over year. And we found out that Discover traffic as a share went from 41% to 55% or 56%, right? So it increased by 14 points year over year. And on the other hand, the search traffic went from 46% to 36%, which dropped by 10%, right? So this is huge, guys. This is huge because this is very, very important. And Google Discover is on the rise. And every year we see some publishers in Asia, in Android-dominated countries, that they get about 80% of their traffic from Google Discover. I don't think it's gonna go away. Google now has ads on it. There's big teams developing it, so it's here to stay. Another thing also, Google in October 2023, it's almost like a year now, and we haven't heard anything about it, but they start testing having Google Discover in desktop. So remember, Google Discover is only showing up right now in mobile devices, but they are testing. If they include Discover in desktop, I would believe that the numbers will grow even much higher. So I think it's here to stay. So before we start, I want to say a word of caution. Okay, guys, Google Discover is extremely unreliable, which means that, you get some traffic today and tomorrow it's all gone. So you want to keep this in mind, right? I have seen this picture many, many times, and sometimes people baffled. It's like, and you search everything, you see everything, and sometimes there is no logical reasons. So I don't want you to depend on Google Discover. And I will tell you, if Google Discover is more than 50% of your traffic, you definitely need to, stop for a second. I'm not saying this is bad, but you need to stop for a second and see how you can grow search, right? The traditional search, how you can grow other channels like newsletters and so on. Do not be dependent on Google Discover. The other thing also, don't take credit for Google Discover, right? I have seen this story happen so many times early on where SEOs is like, oh, look at us. We did all of this. And sometimes you didn't do it anything because you're not actively optimizing for Google Discover. But so the same way you take credit for this, you're gonna take the blame for it. So be careful if you start say, hey, we're doing all of this and you're not really doing anything actively, because if it goes down, you will be taking the blame as well. Okay, now I'm gonna share with you something that after a couple of years, I have been working on Google Discover since 2018, and after all of these years, I came to a conclusion that there is a certain process, and I don't think anyone has shared this before, but if you read Google documentations, and when you read Google documentations and guidelines, you have to read between the lines. So this is, for example, how content appear in Google Discover. This is from official Google guidelines. And you say the content is automatically eligible as long as you index by Google and you meet Discover content policies. There is no guarantee that you appear in Google Discover. All their content may appear, and they talk about some manual actions, and then they go further and say, hey, we care about titles, we care about engagement, don't manipulate the appeal, timely RSS feeds, and so on. So I came up with this process. I believe this is the process that happens with Google Discover, right? The first step is crawling and indexing. And this is like the regular search Google bots, right? They come, they find your content, they crawl it, they index it. You have to be indexed to be in Google Discover. The second thing is like here, eligibility. It has to be a new URL, right? Discover content, you have to meet Discover content policies. You must have high resolution, large images. You need to be mobile friendly. You need to have a good EAT, like clear dates, bylines, authors, and so on. 99% it needs to be timely content, and you have to be on the safe search side of things. And I'm going to talk about safe search in a second. Then you go, once you're eligible, you go in a sandbox, right? And the sandbox, Google is doing two things. They do something called content classification, and then they gather information about that URL. And I think it's very, very important, and a lot of people don't think about that. The content classification, Google will take your content and they will go an extra step by understanding and analyzing the entities and topics, which are categories, right, of that URL. And then they start matching the next step, matching it against the interests of the users in Google Discover, right? And the second thing is like, is this, it determines how long this content will remain in Google Discover and other things. Do you have sufficient audience for this Google Discover, for this article, right? So Google actually looks at the Chrome data and they see, is this URL actually getting traffic or not, right? And the second thing, is this URL getting social buzz or not? I believe this determines a lot of how long you stay in the sandbox and how long you stay in Google Discover. These two things, your audience traction and your social traction, and we're going to talk about both of them. Remember, the beauty about Google Discover algorithm, I don't know if you ever used Chrome CrowdTangle before, right? CrowdTangle was a tool that tells you like, oh, this is popular in other social platforms and so on. A part of Google Discover algorithm now is this article has some social traction, right? And it depends on the social platforms that they have access to, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, and other platforms, right? And does this article actually getting audience, getting traffic? Once they do the sandboxing, then it's released in Google Discover, matching all the users that have similar interests to the categories and the entities that they have. Okay, So the first thing is like Google Discover has its own policies. Let's talk about the content policies for a second, because maybe 50% of the time we see issues with the traffic because of violations to the content policies. The first thing that is very important, ads. And I have seen sites that have a lot of intrusive ads or a lot of ads lose their traffic in Google Discover, and it was mainly ads, right? So when you look, I think in Google Better Business Bureau or Better Ads Bureau or something like this, they said your ad should not be more than 30% of mobile pages. Okay, so this is the only number that we have, a solid number that we have. So if you look at the page density, right, your ads, how big are your ads in comparison to the whole page? Are they intrusive or not, right? And stuff like this. Remember, this is a mobile product, right? So all the mobile ad policies apply to this product. So ads are very important. The second thing is like Google has highlighted few of different types of content that they will not include in Google Discover. So adult themes, sexually explicit content, right? Artificial freshening, and we're gonna talk a lot about this in few minutes. Any kind of like dangerous content, manipulated media is huge. Like if you create images that look like the people in the image are doing something, but it's not really true, it gives a certain impression that it's a false impression. Hateful content, any controversial medical content. So you are pushing something that goes or run contrary to scientific and medical consensus. Misleading terrorist content, transparency. They say that you need to be transparent. Who's writing the content? Who are the publishers? What are the publication? Can they reach out to you, contact you, and so on? Harassing and so on, personal confidential content, spam, and so on, and satire. Satire has been mentioned here and there, but satire content, a lot of times people get confused because the contents, people only get a headline and image, and it's out of context. So people might think that this is an actual facts or information. So a lot of times people actually removing satire out of Google Discover. Okay, let's talk about content classification. One of the steps that I mentioned, where Google takes your article and then start classifying it into entities and topics. We said entities are all coming from knowledge, Google Knowledge Graph, and all the topics are Google from Google Taxonomy, which is like cloud.google.com, natural language, docs, categories. There is about 2,000 categories that Google has. There are 3 levels, parent, child, and subchild. And the first category is about 28 levels. Now, the beauty about this taxonomy, it's the same exact categories that they're using in trends, the same taxonomy that they're using in ads, shopping, search, and so on. So it's using the same taxonomy for all languages in all countries. They don't care about your taxonomy on the site or your categorization, right? They have their own categorization. So keep this in mind because we're going to talk more about it. And I was like searching around Google, and I found that actually they do something very similar with ads. So the user visits a website, then they start to understand the topics and the categories of this article. And then based on all of this, they start showing certain dynamic ads to the user if you're using AdSense. It's a very similar technology, right? Google visits the page, grabs all the entities and topics and so on from this page, and this is how they start matching it to the user interests. Okay, so we spoke about how Google Discover works, right? And the 4 steps and the classification and the sandboxing and so on. Now, can you really optimize for Google Discover, right? So it's highly personalized. This is not like Google News. This is not like anything else, not like Google Search. And I can argue that no 2 users will ever see the same feed, right? And Google actually, John Mueller and others said, you know what? There is no way to optimize for Google Discover, right? And they are right, but there are ways to optimize indirectly for Google Discover that we can actually discuss today. So these are, I have been working on these steps for like the last 2 years, and I believe these are the 11 ways that you can optimize for Google Discover. Optimizing for audience, optimizing for content, optimizing for other factors. And we're gonna go through one by one to discuss all of them and tell you exactly what are the tactics that we use and we use for our clients, and the tactics I have been using when I was in-house as well. So let's talk about the first thing. Understand or uncover user interests. We said the last step of the discover, right, is matching entities and categories of an article to user interests. And we said that user interests are coming from their past search history and all that stuff. You cannot uncover the audience themselves. So let's uncover their interests by understanding what is working for you in terms of entities and categories. Do you see how we did it? Like we're reverse engineering. Let's understand what works on your site first. This can lead us to understand the user interests, right? So once you understand what's working for your site, then you can produce more of that content. So there's only two ways that you can grow your Google Discover traffic. Number one, understanding what works for you and doubling down on that. Hey, cats work for you, keep doing cats, right? And then understanding what other potential content that might work for you that you're not writing much about. Dogs, we only wrote few articles, but it did very well for us. We don't know if it's actually like something that will continue to work for us. We need to test it, increase the content production, and see if it's going to work for us. That's it, right? So these are the two strategies. So let's continue here a little bit, right? And Google Discover are going to give you a lot of hints, right? They give you labels. Like if you go to your Google Discover feed, you know, like, hey, machine learning, because you follow it. We have other stuff that you might care about, skincare and stuff like this. So Google is all about entities and topics, and they show you this in the feed itself. I'm going to tell you how I did it in the tool, GD Dash. So you can take this recipe and you can apply it. This is a step-by-step. If you have development at house, you can do that. If you don't, you might hire someone or get a tool. But these are the 4 steps that will enable you to understand how or what of your content really works in Google Discover. The first step, you're going to get a daily feed of which URLs every day are getting Google Discover traffic. And you're going to get this from Google Search Console through the APIs, or you can get it directly in BigQuery. And remember, there's few days lag. The second step, you're going to get the content for each of these URLs and utilize Google natural language processing, right? So I'm telling you how we do it in the tool, exactly step by step, okay? When you have the APIs from the Google NLP, right? The NLP API will tell you for each of your articles, these are all the entities and these are all the categories. So they're telling you exactly how they understand your content, okay? The fourth step is you're gonna put impressions, clicks, and CTR against all the entities and all the categories, and then you aggregate the data to understand which topics work for you, categories, and so on. Now, you're gonna hear me mention impressions a lot of times. I believe impressions, and hear me very well, guys, I believe impressions are the most important metric in Google Discover. Impressions is Google's decision to show more or less of your content. It's not clicks. I know you care about clicks, the traffic, okay? Your clicks is only showing you how effective your headline and your image are. You understand the difference between the two? So when you analyze Google Discover, you need to focus on impressions. When you analyze which entities and which categories, focus on impressions. Google is showing more or less of you, not on the clicks, okay? Because the clicks, let's say you have a very high impressions, but your headline is not that great, you're not gonna get a lot of clicks, okay? So focus on the impressions. So this is in GD Dash how we do it, right? The 4 steps that I followed. We take all the content, we analyze it, we build the category map, and then we can tell this client, hey, food and drinks is the most important category that's working for you. It drove 1.3 billion impressions, and it has a high CTR of 6. But when you talk about sports, right, all the way here, yes, it drives 7 or 8 million impressions, and it has a high CTR, but this is very small compared to your main categories. So you start to understand which categories of content that works well for you. Where do you need to focus your efforts? Another example here, this is a sports site. So sports and news, and if you look under news, you will see sports news versus like sensitive subjects. And sensitive subjects actually is one of the most popular categories in Google Discover. What are sensitive subjects? Usually they always number 1 in Google Discover. Sensitive subjects are war, violence, abortion, gun control, all of these topics that Google deemed to be a sensitive subject, they all added here. Okay, so we got all our categories, we got all the numbers, how many pages fall in each category. So this is how you should analyze the content to understand the interests, right? And this is a news site, okay? And when we showed the site this data, they were like, wow, okay. So they write a lot about news. You see here, they wrote 1,600 articles on news, Google categorized in news, and only 300 articles on pets. For news, they received 218 million. For pets, they received 138 million. So definitely news is working for them. But when you calculate something we call the median impressions per article, which means how many impressions I'm getting for each of the articles, pets is generating 3 times the number of impressions for each article that they write versus news. Now, we're not telling them, hey, stop writing news, but we're saying there's a huge opportunity on expanding on pets because for every article they write, they get 9,000 impressions versus news, they get 3,000 impressions. So you can imagine you can increase your traffic by doubling down on pets and animals. So instead of only 300 articles a month, you double it to 600 articles a month, you have increased that number 138 million to 160 million impressions like this. So this is the first step. This is categories, right? And you can go into like different, like almost 2,000 categories. When we analyze their entities, and you should be doing this as well, it really follows the same kind of approach, right? So Russia, right, or Russia-related content, they wrote about 40 articles. And for golden retrievers, they wrote 11 articles, right? So almost 4 times the traffic. You can see that for the golden retriever, they received 400,000 impressions for the 11 articles, while for the Russia content, they receive only 110 impressions for the 39 articles. So every article they wrote about golden retriever received 4 times the traffic versus Russia. And you can start comparing and coming up with a lot of these. Yes, Islam, categories based on NLP have nothing to do with website categories. This is all Google categorization. Okay, so this is the first step, understanding the interests by analyzing your topics or categories and entities driven by Google NLP to understand how much impressions you get for each category and how many impressions you get for each entity so you can see what's working for you and what you need to test. So this is step number 1, and it's the most fundamental thing about optimizing for Google Discover. Step number 2, you need to deliver timely content, right? So when you analyze, right, there is a lot of studies out there. Some claim that 50% of all Google Discover content is news versus like maybe 15% evergreen and the rest is a mix. But when you analyze your traffic, you will find that for news sites who do like evergreen and news, we found that almost 90% of all the traffic is coming for timely content, trending content, news content, right? Evergreen has its place, but it's like ups and downs based on like new search behaviors that the user have or something that they care about, right? Versus news. So when you talk about this, it means that you need to focus on trends. Hey, John, we don't write about trends. We don't write about news. I will tell you what to do, okay? But trends is the second most important thing in Google Discover. So in News Dash, for example, we track every news trend, how many people are searching for this news trend, is it going up or down, you know, and we have it by categories and stuff like this. So we notice that when something is trending, right, around the country, and you write about it, you will get almost like a massive spike. I did some studies in Condé Nast, and we found that when we match the trend timing by writing stories, we see an increase in traffic by 60%, right? You need to ride the wave, okay? So it's very important, the timing around trends. Most of the time, so we have 2 metrics in GD Dash. One is called active days and one is called total lifetime. Active days is like, total lifetime is like how many days your story will remain in Google Discover regardless of how much traffic it's getting. If it's getting 1 visit, we're still counting it. But active days is like meaningful traffic, at least 50% of the traffic that's still coming through. So we noticed that The majority of sites right now, 30 or article, 37% stay 1 day, 2 days, 40%, and then it gets smaller and smaller. So between 1 to 3, right? This is like almost like 90% of the content. Okay, John, I don't write about news. I have no clue what to write about trends. I came up with a concept when I was in Condé Nast. I call it trends adjacent content. Okay. So let's do some examples. You are an architecture site, right? A celebrity had a wedding, and you have an article about like the architecture or like photos from this celebrity house. Guess what? If you republish this content, push it in your homepage, and we used to do this even for search, you will see a spike coming to that article because the celebrity is trending and it's like related to that celebrity. Let's say you're a medical site and the tea prices are soaring, right? Amid global conflict, there is something happening. Tea is becoming very short in supply, and the prices are going up. And you're a medical site, and you can write something like, "Can tea really boost your immune system?" It's related to the trend. It's not on the trend, but adjacent to the trend. That will cause you a spike in traffic. You're a food blog, and the bear, I don't know if you guys watch this TV series or not. I love that TV series, right? The bear. It's trending. It just came back in season. Everyone's searching for it, reviews and so on. And you're a food site. Recreate all the dishes from the bear at home with these recipes. So do you see what I did? I created adjacent content to the trend to ride the wave. Okay, so this is something really, really works well here. So we spoke about interests, we spoke about the importance of trends, titles. I believe titles are the most important element that will drive clicks to your site. Right? Images are very important. If you go from a small image to a big image, that increases your clicks by 3% or 3 times, sorry. But titles are the most important, right? And the official Google Discover guidelines, which are very important, hey, don't be a clickbaity, don't manipulate all of that stuff. These are the official Google guidelines. But I'm gonna be honest with you, the reality is different, right? So I call it be clicky but not baity, right? So Google say don't do clickbaity titles. I tell you be clicky but don't baity because it works, and these are the best headlines that works, right? So if you look at these are some of like the most trafficked headlines in our system. McDonald's just made a bittersweet announcement. It's not 8 glasses a day anymore, and so on, right? These are all headlines that work very well, and all of them are clicky, right? So we analyzed 150 million, and we isolated the top 1,000 most traffic, most clicks, most impression headlines, and we found they fall in these categories. The headlines are sensational or surprising elements, right? Titles that spark curiosity. So you're not giving the whole thing. You're not giving the answer immediately in your title, right? He bought a cruise ship on a Craigslist and spent over 1 million restoring it. Then his dream sank, right? Oh, wow. I want to read that, right? Zoo admits that their pandas are painted dogs. Human interests, right? 37-year-old mom earns $73,000. 63-year-old CEO shares the top 3 red flags. Click worthy lists, numbers still works very, very well. 5 signs you're not doing this, right? And it's funny, I did a study 10 years ago and I found that odd numbers work better than even numbers, and prime numbers even work the best. So if you do 11 things, people feel like it's genuine versus 10 things. So prime, odd, and then even numbers in your lists. Fear or controversy-driven headlines. Zero-calorie sweetener linked to blood clots. Reference to well-known individuals or celebrities. This is like similar to the trends, right? Incorporating trending topics or current events. I also noticed that this worked really, really good. First-hand headlines. I am 63. I worked my whole life. I just got fired after announcing my retirement. This is legal, right? And this is a story, one of the stories that was like doing very well in Google Discover for weeks, right? So the first-hand And then when you go, it's funny, when you go to that story and read it, it's not even a first-hand story. It's like they get a quote from someone and they use that quote as the headline and they made it that. But the headline was really, really good. So personal experience, advice or learnings, confessions or reflections, right? All of these work very well. Um, Inclusion of attention grabbing adjectives. So when you talk about the language, right, you need a word in your title that is like, triggers emotions, some kind of attention grabbing, rare, surprising, shocking, unexpected, right? Promise to valuable information, secrets to, how to, emotional triggers, not prepared for, breaks heart, tears, melting hearts, urgency, limited time offer, mention of age always works well, questions and challenges, why is the economy so bad for people, and stuff like that. Okay, this actually incites a really nice idea. I didn't try it, but if you can test this on your homepage, if you have the software, right, like Chartbeat and other ones can actually change headlines to measure the CTR. So if you have a landing page, your homepage, or a channel page, and you can change the headlines automatically to test which headline works, you can find which headlines actually resonate better with users and so on. And then you can use AI on top of that. The beauty about where we are right now with ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and many others, you can take the best working headlines for you and the content, put them in one of these tools. So we do this in GD Dash where we analyze all the content that worked for the client and the headlines and so on. And then we'll start saying, hey, focus more on NFL, focus more on playoffs, focus more on NBA off season, and so on. And then ChatGPT or others can analyze all your headlines, all your content. If you give them like the headlines, the impressions, the categories, and so on, they can analyze all of this and give you really solid recommendations. Someone asked in the questions like, how many words? To be honest with you, I don't care about the number of words. This is a correlation. We don't believe it's like an actual causation, but we found that impressions are the highest, around 8 words and around 23 words, right? But here you see, number of stories that we have is very small, but really it's like, I would say the same recommendations that I will say when you optimize for news, anywhere from 9 to 12 is good in general. Google may use OG title. So, hey, John, we cannot play around with our headlines. And I agree with you. It needs to be optimized for search, especially if you're a news publisher, right? Focus on entities and so on, which still can work for Google Discover. But you have OG titles. And a lot of times, Google actually use OG titles. So you have like schema titles. You have the headline that appear on the page, H1, and you have the title that appears in the browser or the SEO title, which is in the head meta tag, right? You have a fourth one called OG title, which is mainly for social media. So Google tried to find the best headline to display, and we found Google a lot, like 20% of the time, they actually take the OG title to display in Google Discover, okay? So this is a good place to practice all these kind of like tactics that we spoke about titles to bring here in the OG title. So this is an example story, the title and the structured data inside Portland. The OG title is this, and Google choose to grab the OG title, not the actual title of the story. Now, I'm going to talk about the different content formats that work well in Google Discover, okay? So the search appearance that Google Discover, if you go to Google Search Console and analyze, right? So you will see in 2022, AMP top stories, which I believe like actual news top stories, AMP stories, which is the web stories or visual stories, sometimes it's called, and videos, right? In 2024, AMP top stories or news top stories were 93% of the impressions, getting 8% of all CTR, right? So this is analyzing all the 600 trillion impressions that we have in the system, right? Video were 4% of the impressions, getting 5% of CTR. News Showcase will start showing up. This is invite only, but if you go to Google News in US, it's not available in every country. You will see that, hey, Google is showcasing certain publishers, and News Showcase is showing a lot in Google Discover 1.0 4% of all impressions, right? Getting decent CTR. So this was early when I did this analysis on 2024. That was early this year, January to April. So I did this analysis again, and I found that AMP story are almost gone, right? The visual stories, the web stories, right? It's not. Some people still believe and swear that it's getting them traffic, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that visible anymore, right? So this is like less than 0.0001% of the impressions that we see in Google Discover. And top story or top stories are still getting the majority videos, and then the news showcase increased. More publishers are getting into the news showcase. So when you talk about videos for a second, which is like something that you need to think about, right? So in GD Dash, we have something called Google Discover Tracking by Entity. Hey, John, we write a lot about Taylor Swift, we write a lot about, I don't know, presidential elections. So we create like users and we track what type of feeds as a user that has only a single interest, Taylor Swift. That's all what they care. So we feed Google that this user has a Taylor Swift interest. And then we see what type of stories that are appearing and we track it like every half an hour. And then we see that, for example, for some entities, videos are very high. For Taylor Swift, for example, 15% of all Google Discover stories that appear in Google Discover feeds are videos, right? And then when we analyze which sites that appear the most as videos in Google Discover, right? We found that Instagram and YouTube are almost the same, right? 27%, 25%. So these are the two, and this is like from CBS Sports. Their Instagram was appearing for, I think, NFL or something, right? So think about for your video strategy, right? Instagram, YouTube, and when you do these accounts, make sure that you have like as if you're optimizing for SEO, right? The description, stuff like that. TViPlayer.iol.pt, we have a lot of Portuguese clients, so that's why I think it's appearing here. So we can ignore that one specifically, but Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, these are the top ones that really appear most of the time. So between Instagram and YouTube, you can go wrong. Images, right? The official recommendations, 1200 pixels or using AMP. Make sure you use max image preview, large settings, and your code 16 to 9 is the best. Appropriate alt text, descriptive caption, all of the regular SEO recommendations, but large images, high resolution images is a key factor in getting good clicks and higher CTR in Google. Be careful about manipulating or misleading media, right? The image is saying one thing, but the story is about something else, or the image makes you think that something happening that really didn't happen in the story. So this is actually generates some manual actions that we have seen in Google Discover. Now, we analyzed about maybe, I don't know, 10,000 images for the top 10,000 stories out of the 150 million. And the one common things that we saw over and over and over, people. The best stories have people, and not only people, close-ups of people. So we analyze, we put all the images for the top stories, right? And we ask our AI models to analyze these images. And we found that vibrant, high contrast colors work very well. Blue is really good. Warm colors for entertainment. People in images, especially with close-up or doing something in action. Sometimes if you have text overlays and so on. So we have all of this here. Backgrounds, graphical elements, image quality, high, seasonal content, visual trends, right? All of this works very well. So I'm not going to go a lot through images. I want to talk to you about engagement. I mentioned to you guys before that Google is getting a lot of data from Chrome, not only for Discover, but for so many other things. And they have denied it for so many years. And with the recent leaks, it was confirmed. And we believe that Google Discover is getting a lot of data from Chrome about like audience, how if our audience actually reading and visiting that article. Are they engaging? Are they spending time and stuff like this? So look at the user engagement and dwell time and see which articles do they correlate with Google Discover or not, and find these topics. How can you make the user stay longer on your site? A video, clicks, related stories. So think about how we can increase dwell time on the site. We also found that a part of engagement is the engagement of the users. It determines their interests, right? If I keep clicking a specific site or a specific topic over and over and over, Google Discover will give me more of it. So in order for you to understand, we give you all like some of the top categories in Google Discover, right? And the average CTR for them, because not every category. Now, adult content doesn't appear a lot. Some content is like categorized as adult. No surprise there, 13% CTR in Google Discover. Travel is 7%, autos 5%, home and garden 5%, and so on. News is about 2%, right? And then it goes lower to business about 1%. If you look at shopping, I don't know if you do shopping or not, but the most highest CTR is like outdoor markets, discounts and outlet stores, wholesalers and liquidators, department stores, and so on, goes all the way up to antiques, which is 6%. So shopping has a very high CTR in Google Discover. When it comes to news, business is like on the lower end, less than 1%. Average news, like I said, 2%, right? And then it goes all the way up. Sports news is the highest CTR in Google Discover. So if you're in the sports business, this should be your benchmark, about 9% CTR. And within sports, I was shocked. The Australian fans have the highest CTR in Google Discover, Australian football versus American football. So American football is like 10%, 11%. In Australia, they have like almost 14% for Australian football category. So this is all the different CTRs and engagement in Google Discover. Number 7, social buzz. I'm a big believer that social, and I mentioned this like 4 years ago, and a lot of people start talking about it and including it into their presentations and so on. But all these social buzz elements that out there came from that study I did in 2020. And I noticed back then that Twitter interactions had 90% correlation with Google Discover. And a lot of tests were done that people putting something on Twitter and inflating like engagement, and they see like this story is doing very well in Google Discover as well. Again, this is not causation. I believe it's a correlation, because maybe if something organically works in Twitter, it will also work on Discover because the same social nature. But I believe Google is looking at all the social interactions around the URL in Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, public Facebook pages, Instagram, and so on, right? And they taking this into, remember, social traction and audience traction. So you need to work closely with your social media team to make sure to bring social buzz and sharing around Google Discover. I was in a recent conference, ONA, after the deal with Reddit and Google, and business dev VP Jonathan, he was talking about that deal, and he mentioned something very interesting. They also not just share everything with Google, they share the velocity of up votes and down votes on Reddit, right? So Google like know the velocity of social interactions around Reddit stories, and they know if people are favoring it or not favoring it. So I believe Reddit also plays a big role in Google Discover. With posting social, you need to post traffic. And I believe I mentioned to you Chrome data, right? I keep coming to Chrome data. You need to drive traffic to stories that are important for you to do well in Google Discover, right? Some people say direct traffic. Any traffic that Google can see in Chrome is important. You can do push notifications, newsletter, links from the homepage, social media, WhatsApp, whatever, right? If Google can see this in the apps or in Android or like Chrome or desktop, they collect all that information. Number 8, enhance mobile friendliness. I'm not going to go a lot into this, but this is a mobile product, guys, right? So it needs to work on mobile. So everything about mobile friendliness and all the mobile issues you see in Google Search Console is true. We worked with a client last year. They lost 99% of all their traffic. We did 3 things for them. We enhanced their branding. We enhanced their mobile vitals, and the third thing, we increased their EAT. They gain back 70% of that traffic, right? So I believe mobile is very important here. AAT, Google is very clear in their guidelines. They need to know who's writing, who is the publisher, what is about the publication. So this is all things that you need to think about for the site, right? Secure sites, clear dates and bylines, provide information about the publication, contact information, contact us. You might want to give like, who are we, right? The editorial staff or the managing editorial team, and so on. And make sure the authors are actually active in social media, right? Because this is a good point. If Google can verify the social footprint of the writers on social media, it's really good. Uh, you should try to get your knowledge panel in Google. Okay, and there's a lot of articles and studies out there, but this gives you authority. In GD Dash, you can put like your name, ESPN, and we can tell you your score, relevancy score in Google Knowledge Panel. You can search for your brand name or for your name or for your writer's name, and you can see if Google is giving you a knowledge panel. So I believe this is adds to your AAT scores. Um, when you do an about us page or about the author page, you need to start like this. John Shehata is an SEO expert, right? You need to mention the name is and a function, right? This is very important to start your bio with, right? Because this tells Google, so and so is our crime investigator at site, right? So this should be the first sentence of your bio. Mentioned in their expertise, what type of organization did they get, awards, accomplishments, and stuff like this, and link to their social platforms. This is a schema. It's called the person schema, where you can say this person same as, and you can mention all their different like social platforms into schema. Okay, I'm gonna talk about controversial topic right now: URL refreshers or refreshing URLs, as Google called it, right? Remember that Google Discover, right? And use this at your own risk. I'm not advising at all, advising that you do this, but I'm telling you that this is happening and it's happening in huge quantities. Um, Google Discover is all about the URL, all the URL metrics, right? So for them, domain.com/slug is different from domain.com/slug question mark parameters. Okay, these are two different URLs. And we have seen some sites that by mistake keep adding the session IDs to the URLs, and Google is actually grabbing every session ID for that same URL and sending them traffic. Okay. You should consider refreshing the URL in two cases. One, the Google Discover traffic dies down for an important URL that you have. Let's say, hey, we should be getting, we were getting 100,000. This URL is still important to be out there. Now we're getting less than 5% or 10%. Let's refresh this URL. Or you put the URL an important story, but you didn't get the expected traffic for that category. Let's say entertainment, your average article will do, I don't know, 10,000 impressions or clicks, and you got nothing. You might consider this. There's a lot of sites are automatically doing all of this. Google is aware of it. Google hates it because it's the same content, right? But for some countries, the whole country is doing it. So they're not doing much about it. What should you do to refresh the content in the right way? You need to republish the article on a new URL, new timestamps, change the image. You might do minor tweaks to the headline, minor updates to the content, boost social signals for the new headline, for the new URL, and drive traffic to that page. Make sure you don't abuse it, and you only do this for news. You don't do it for evergreen, right? You should not be changing evergreen URLs. And I'm going to tell you in a second. And you do it for important stories. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This is actually a legitimate use, right? This site has a live blog, and in their live schema, each element has its own items. And it's funny because it's like /live slug #1, but the #1 actually redirect to slug1/1, right? So they did 20 updates on that live blog during that day. Every single update got traffic. But the interesting part, the permanent link from the homepage got the most traffic. All the updates got some traffic, right? But the main URL got all of the traffic. So Google Discover will send traffic and will get every update for every URL and send traffic to the story. Now, this is evergreen, okay? And think of that story like, I don't know, 10 best Netflix movies to watch May 2023, 11 best horror Netflix movies to watch June 2024, right? And it's the same exact URL. The URL doesn't change here, right? And we found that every time, or most of the time, they updated the URLs, there is a spike in the traffic within a day or so. So for URLs, if you have like mortgage rates, best whatever, do a refresh policy or like scheduler to refresh this to bring more traffic to the article. And this is really nice to do A/B testing. You will have one URL with two different headlines or two different images and see which one is working, you know. So you can do a lot of testing because of the Google Discover. The final thing and the most important thing, right? Everything we discussed today was all about your site, understanding Google Discover, but there is a big way that you can actually understand what works in Google Discover itself, right? So either you track users in Google Discover and see what they're seeing, right? Or you create like a fake user with specific interest and see what they're seeing. And we did both of them in our tools because we want to understand what are people getting. So you want to write something new, you get this for content and inspiration, you go here and you say, show me the most popular stories, right? In United States. And then you get all these stories and then you use your adjacent trends tactic. Oh, this is trending. Oh, this is a nice idea. I might actually copy it and write something else. So you can see what's trending in the country. You can also see what's trending by a site. So, hey, Yahoo is always like #1, right? And you go to see all the Yahoo stories in the platform and you see like, oh, these are the stories that are working very well for them. So you can copy or get some content ideas. I also like to look by category, right? Okay, so you will see, oh, politics is coming up. In the last week or so, weather actually was #2 or 1. So that was the most visible category in Google Discover. So you can see what is Google Discover is pushing right now and what's important. Okay, entertainment news is not that hot. 23% visibility versus politics is like #1 visibility. So you can understand which categories that Google Discover is pushing in this. I'm going to tell you something that I did for so many years, and I'm going to share it with you now. If you have multiple publications in different languages, you can see what's working in Google Discover in one country and see if it's relevant to other publication and translate it. And most of the time, 70% of the time, it will work in Google Discover in the other country. Okay, so here in NewsDash, you have access to all the different countries. So you go to Germany and then you start translating the headlines. It's like, oh, wow, that story is killing it. Let's take it, translate it to English or write something about it similar to English and push it out there. And usually that works very well by seeing what other stories work in other countries and push it for Google Discover as well. You can also look at the other articles. The other way that you can do this, so you can spy on like in NewsDash, we have like a user panel, 6 million users, 4 to 6 million users that we see exactly what they see by consent. We see what they see in Google Discover feeds, right? So we can tell you like what's viral around. In GD Dash, we actually create a user. Hey, John, we really write a lot about Taylor Swift or US elections or Bitcoins, right? So we create a user specifically with one single interest. And then we start showing you, right, what are the top stories? So this is American football, right? These are the top stories that always appear in Google Discover. And over the last 90 days, 10% or 7% of the traffic is videos, right? And you can see a list of all the stories. This is presidential elections. The Guardian is the most popular site around elections in the US, and Google Discover, followed by BBC, CNN, and so on. So you can see all of these here. Sorry, this is in United Kingdom, not in US. I'm glad I put the label here. So you can see all of this. So this is another way where you can see what's already working in Google Discover and start like imitating these stories or writing about similar stuff, and then you get these ideas. So these are the 11 ways. Now I'm gonna go very quickly over the 11 reasons why you lose Google Discover traffic. And this is based on my history for the last 3 years and working with a lot of clients. The biggest reason, so this is the Google official reasons when John Mueller was asked, oh, people change interest, content types are different. Google keeps testing new content types or new formats on the Discover feeds, updates to Google search, In my opinion, the biggest reason why you lose or gain Google Discover traffic is Google algo or core updates. That's the number one. And we see it in 70–80% of all our clients. It always happens around core updates, right? You gain or you lose, right? And in our opinion, the biggest thing, it's around quality of your content, right? Google has redeemed some of the content to be high quality, low quality, and this will impact your Google Discover. The second reason is some of your content or a lot of your content is not safe for work, or like Google has a filter called safe search. And you can do like, I give you two examples here. You can go to Google, type site : your site, and then in the URL and safe equals. So it means this is show me everything. So, and then you go to the code and you search for the word results. So Google is telling you, hey, and this is like directional. We have 10,300,000 pages of your content in our index. Then you're going to repeat the same thing, but instead of safe equals nothing, you're going to do safe equals active. And then Google will show you the results, right? So here, between here and here, Google is telling me there's about 200,000 articles on this site that are not safe. Okay, so here, safe, 10,300,000, 10,100,000. So Google has identified almost 200,000 pages on this site to be not safe. This is one of the second most popular thing that we see around sports and certain types of sites, right? And the best way to fix this is to move this content to a subdomain, right? Just take it off your site, put it all in a subdomain or a subfolder. You can also add like meta name ratings, adult, into that content, but the best way is just move it out of your domain, put it in a subdomain. The third reason is the site's slow. This is a mobile product, so you need to enhance your mobile numbers. A lot of sites we have seen, they focus so much in Google Discover, they became like this a social kind of a site, and they lost the news essence of their site, and Google start removing them from news, and they lost their status as a news publisher, right? We see once this happens, actually they lose all their Google Discover traffic. So you need to maintain your news guidelines and criteria active all the time, right? Don't lower your guard. Crawling and technical issues, index, and so on. Weak AAT, we work with a client, we improve the authors, and we start seeing traffic coming back. Site content is extremely seasonal, right? So it happens, right? It's like, hey, you go up when it's seasonal, you go down when it's not. There's not much buzz about your URLs. Site content is thin and extremely focused on Discover. Bad or poor user experience. Remember, Google is getting Chrome signal data about user engagement on the pages themselves. So this is an important one. And finally, you violated one of the Google Discover policies around content, dangerous, harassing, manipulated media, and so on. These encompass all the different 11 reasons that I have found and the different ways to fix each one of them. But there is low publish count. If you publish 5 stories, intrusive interstitials, low brand equity, technical issues, and so on. Now, before you start fixing stuff, you need to understand what went down, okay? Maybe Google, like for example, this site, right, writes a lot about food and stuff, but sometimes they write about jobs, and it was working for them for a while. But Google is like, you're not really a job site. You're not a science site. So if it makes sense, if the drop makes sense that you're losing impressions in categories that are not your main core, right? Maybe it's okay. Maybe Google is saying, hey, you're not worthy to get that traffic in this category, okay? Another thing also is it's seasonal, right? Hey, yes, we got all this traffic because winter sports are gone. We're not getting that traffic. You need to know if it's happening to the other publishers, right? So in GD we can compare you against the whole data set of the 400 publishers, and we can tell you, you dropped, but other publishers dropped too, right? So it's fine. Google is like doing this. And here, you look at do you remember the slide where I showed you the most popular categories in Google Discover? In a certain point of time, a couple of weeks ago, politics took a dip from 100 points to 50 points and how much they appear in Google Discover, while weather went from 50 to 100. Okay? Because remember, it's all about trends and what people are searching for. So maybe it's the visibility of your whole category that took a dip overall.